Hello there, and welcome back to the sleepy ocean. Tonight, we are going to descend into the quietest museums on Earth, slipping beneath the waves to explore the slow, suspended world of underwater archaeology. To begin, we must adjust our senses to an environment where history is not buried in dry dust, but preserved in a cold, pressurized embrace that stops time in its tracks. Imagine the surface of the ocean as a barrier, a shimmering blue ceiling that separates the noisy, oxidizing world of the air from the silent, preserving world of the deep. When a ship sinks, or a city is swallowed by the rising tide, it enters a realm of suspended animation. The water acts as a heavy, protective blanket. In the deep ocean, the temperature hovers near freezing, and the darkness is absolute. This lack of light and heat slows down the chemical reactions of decay. A wooden hull that would rot in a decade on land can last for centuries on the seabed, its timbers waterlogged and heavy, settling into the sediment like a sleeping giant. The pressure of the water holds the structure together, and the lack of oxygen in the mud prevents the bacteria and fungi that consume organic matter from doing their work. We are entering a library where the books are made of wood and bronze, and the librarian is the ocean itself, keeping watch over the artifacts with a patience that is measured in millennia. The discipline of underwater archaeology truly began with a storm and a group of sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera in 1900. These divers, seeking shelter from a gale, dropped their anchor and decided to dive on a deep shelf they had never explored before. Instead of sponges, they found a field of corpses. They surfaced in a panic, babbling about a heap of rotting men and horses at the bottom of the sea. What they had actually found was a Roman shipwreck laden with bronze and marble statues that had been resting there for 2,000 years. The rotting men were bronze statues corroded by the salt water, and the horses were marble sculptures eroded by marine borers. This discovery birthed the field, proving that the seabed was not just a void, but a repository of art and technology. Among the debris was a lump of corroded bronze gears that would later be identified as the Antikythera mechanism, the world's first analog computer. This single object, preserved only because it was hidden in the sea, rewrote our understanding of ancient technology, showing us that the ocean hides secrets that can change the way we view the timeline of human ingenuity. The preservation of artifacts underwater relies heavily on the chemistry of the sediment, specifically the anaerobic conditions found in deep mud and silt. When an object sinks into a soft, muddy seabed, it is quickly covered. The mud acts as a seal, cutting off the supply of oxygen. Without oxygen, the aerobic bacteria that typically devour wood, leather, and fabric cannot survive. This creates a time capsule effect. Archaeologists have found ropes, seeds, and even human brains preserved in this black, oxygen-starved mud. The mud itself is often a mix of clay and organic detritus that creates a chemical environment perfectly suited for stasis. Digging in this environment is a delicate process. As soon as the mud is removed and fresh, oxygenated water touches the artifact, the clock of decay starts ticking again instantly. It is a race against chemistry, where the archaeologist must gently fan away the protective layer of silt without waking the destructive forces that have been sleeping for centuries. One of the most spectacular examples of this preservation is the Uluburun shipwreck, found off the coast of Turkey, which dates back to the late Bronze Age, around 1300 BC. This ship was a floating market of the ancient world, carrying a cargo so diverse it serves as a snapshot of international trade before the collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations. The wreck lies on a steep, rocky slope, requiring divers to work at depths that limit their bottom time to 20 minutes. In that brief window, they uncovered 10 tons of copper ingots and 1 ton of tin ingots, the precise recipe for making bronze on an industrial scale. The copper was mined in Cyprus, and the tin came from as far away as Afghanistan or Cornwall. Alongside the metal were jars of terebinth resin, elephant tusks, hippopotamus teeth, and ostrich eggshells. The ship is a physical manifest of a globalized economy that existed over 3,000 years ago, preserved in the blue silence of the Mediterranean, proving that the ancient world was connected by a web of shipping lanes that were as busy and vital as our modern highways. The history of reaching these depths is a story of human ingenuity, fighting against the crushing weight of the water, epitomized by the early use of the diving bell. Long before scuba tanks, ancient explorers used inverted cauldrons or barrels to trap a pocket of air and lower themselves into the sea. Alexander the Great is rumored to have descended in a glass barrel to observe the wonders of the deep. In the 17th century, Edmund Halley, of comet fame, perfected a wooden diving bell that was supplied with fresh air by weighted barrels sent down from the surface. The divers inside sat on a bench in the damp, pressurized air, watching the water level rise and fall at their feet. They could only work for short periods before the buildup of carbon dioxide and the cold became unbearable. These early bells were claustrophobic, dark chambers where men huddled together, breathing the same stale air, separated from the lethal ocean by a few inches of wood and the physics of air pressure. As divers descend to excavate these sites, they must contend with the physiological phenomenon known as nitrogen narcosis, or the Martini effect. As pressure increases, the nitrogen in the air we breathe becomes soluble in the bloodstream and acts as an anesthetic on the brain. At depths of 100 feet or more, this can induce a feeling of euphoria, confusion, and drunkenness. An archaeologist working on a deep wreck might suddenly find the task of measuring a timber to be hilariously funny or impossibly complex. They might forget to check their air supply or feel an urge to give their regulator to a passing fish. This narcosis adds a layer of dreamlike danger to the work. The diver must maintain a razor-sharp focus while their own brain chemistry is trying to pull them into a state of sleepy intoxication. It requires immense mental discipline to perform delicate scientific measurements while floating in a blue haze of nitrogen-induced bliss. The Vasa shipwreck in Stockholm Harbour offers a unique case study in the preservative qualities of brackish water. The Vasa, a massive Swedish warship, sank on its maiden voyage in 1628, just a mile from the shore. The Baltic Sea is unique because it has very low salinity compared to the open ocean. This low salt content prevents the survival of the shipworm, Teredo navalis, the termite of the sea. Because there were no worms to eat the wood, the Vasa sat on the bottom of the harbour for 333 years, largely intact. When it was raised in 1961, it was a ghost ship rising from the mud, complete with its sculptures, its rigging, and even the sails folded in the hold. It is 98% original wood. The preservation was so complete that archaeologists found the skeletons of the crew still wearing their clothes and butter that was still identifiable in the mess tubs. It is a wooden time machine delivered by the specific biological poverty of the Baltic Sea. The biological antagonist of underwater archaeology is the teredo worm, a bivalve mollusk that has evolved to bore into submerged wood. These creatures are not true worms, but clams with a tiny, drill-like shell at the head end. They tunnel through the timber, lining their burrows with a calcium carbonate tube. A teredo infestation can turn a solid oak plank into a honeycomb of fragile lace in a matter of years. In warm, salty waters like the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, they are voracious. They are the reason why so many ancient shipwrecks are reduced to piles of amphorae and ballast stones. The wood has simply been eaten away. The worm digests the cellulose, turning the history of naval architecture into worm castings. For an archaeologist, finding a wreck in Teredo-infested waters often means finding only the shadow of the hull, the shape of the ship preserved in the arrangement of its non-organic cargo after the wood has vanished. The visibility on an underwater excavation is rarely the crystal-clear blue seen in documentaries. More often, it is a world of suspended silt and particulate matter that requires tactile archaeology. When a diver works in a river mouth or a muddy harbour, the slightest movement of a fin or a hand trowel can kick up a cloud of sediment that reduces visibility to zero. This is called silting out. In these conditions, the archaeologists must work by touch alone. They close their eyes and run their gloved hands over the artifacts, feeling the difference between a smooth shard of pottery, a jagged rock, and a piece of wood. They must map the site in their mind's eye, measuring distances by the span of their fingers. It is a slow, meditative process, exploring the past with the fingertips in a world of brown fog, guided only by the texture of the buried objects. The sunken city of Pavlopetri, off the coast of southern Greece, is the oldest submerged city in the world, a Bronze Age settlement that dates back 5,000 years. Unlike a shipwreck, which is a single event, Pavlopetri is a frozen moment of daily life. The foundations of the buildings, the courtyards, and the streets are all clearly visible in just a few meters of water. Divers can swim down the main streets, passing the thresholds of houses where families lived and worked. The city was likely submerged by a series of earthquakes that caused the land to drop relative to the sea level. Inside the ruins, archaeologists have found loom weights, storage jars, and tombs cut into the rock. It is a ghost town where the fish swim through the living rooms, a place where the layout of a prehistoric community is perfectly preserved by the very water that destroyed it. To remove the tons of sand and overburden that cover these sites without damaging the artifacts, archaeologists use a tool known as an airlift or a water dredge. An airlift is essentially a giant underwater vacuum cleaner. It consists of a long, rigid tube. Compressed air is injected into the bottom of the tube. As the air bubbles rise inside the pipe, they expand and create a powerful suction that pulls water and sediment up the tube and ejects it down current. The diver holds the mouth of the airlift gently above the sediment, using their hand to fan the sand into the suction. This allows them to peel back the layers of the seabed with precision. The sound of the airlift is a constant, rhythmic rumble, a mechanical roar that accompanies the delicate work of uncovering the past, turning the excavation into a dusty, underwater mining operation. The most common artifact found on ancient Mediterranean shipwrecks is the amphora, a two-handled ceramic jar used for shipping liquid goods. Amphorae were the shipping containers of antiquity. They were designed to stack perfectly in the hold of a ship, interlocking like puzzle pieces to prevent shifting during rough weather. A single Roman merchant ship could carry thousands of them. Inside these jars, archaeologists find the residue of the ancient economy: olive oil, wine, fish sauce, garum, and grain. Sometimes the seals are still intact. Researchers have opened amphorae to find wine that has turned to vinegar after 2,000 years, or olive pits that still retain their shape. The shape of the amphora changed over time and region, allowing archaeologists to date a wreck and determine its origins simply by looking at the curve of the jar handles, reading the ceramic typology like a calendar. The Mary Rose, the flagship of King Henry VIII, offers a grimly intimate view of Tudor life preserved by the Solent mud. When the ship sank in 1545 during a battle with the French, it heeled over and trapped hundreds of men beneath the anti-boarding netting. They were buried instantly in the soft clay of the seabed. This anaerobic environment preserved not just the wood of the ship, but the personal possessions of the crew. Archaeologists found leather shoes, wooden knit combs with knits still in them, longbows, and even the skeleton of the ship's dog. The preservation was so detailed that we can tell the archers had skeletal deformities from pulling heavy warbows their entire lives. The Mary Rose is a time capsule of a floating Tudor village, capturing the smell, the tools, and the physical toll of naval life in the 16th century. Once a waterlogged wooden artifact is brought to the surface, it faces its greatest danger: drying out. The cellular structure of the wood, having been submerged for centuries, has degraded. The cellulose has been eaten away, and the cell walls are supported only by the water filling them. If the water evaporates, the cells collapse, and the wood shrinks, cracks, and turns to dust. To prevent this, conservationists use a waxy substance called polyethylene glycol, PEG. The artifact is placed in a tank of heated PEG solution for months or even years. The wax slowly diffuses into the wood, replacing the water molecule by molecule. When the wood is finally dried, the waxy PEG hardens and supports the cell walls, freezing the artifact in its shape. This process is slow and expensive, a chemical embalming that allows us to look at a Roman ship in a museum without it crumbling before our eyes. The discovery of the lost city of Heracleion, or Thonis, in the Bay of Abukir off Egypt, revealed a metropolis that was essentially the Venice of antiquity. This city was built on a network of islands in the Nile Delta, interconnected by bridges and canals. It was the main port of entry to Egypt for Greek ships. It sank due to soil liquefaction during an earthquake. The solid ground turned to liquid mud, and the heavy temples and statues slid into the sea. Divers exploring the murky water found colossal statues of red granite standing over 5 meters tall, representing Hapi, the god of the Nile flood. They found hundreds of shipwrecks in the harbor basins and gold coins scattered on the bottom. The city was a place of immense wealth and religious significance. Now resting in the silt, its grand processionals walked only by crabs and divers. Technology has revolutionized the search for these sites with the advent of side-scan sonar. This instrument is towed behind a boat, emitting a fan-shaped pulse of sound toward the sea floor. The sound bounces off rocks, shipwrecks, and debris, creating a shadow-like image of the bottom topography. To a trained eye, a shipwreck on a sonar readout looks like a geometric anomaly in a chaotic landscape, a hard, straight line in a world of curves. It allows archaeologists to map hundreds of square miles of seabed without getting wet. The sonar paints a picture with sound, stripping away the water to reveal the ghost of the wreck lying on the sand, guiding the divers to the exact coordinates of the anomaly. In the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, the cenotes, deep, water-filled sinkholes, hold a different kind of archaeological treasure. To the ancient Maya, these were sacred portals to Xibalba, the underworld. They made offerings to the gods by throwing precious objects and sometimes human sacrifices into the deep, clear water. Underwater archaeologists, diving in these cenotes, find a stratigraphy of offerings. Near the surface, there might be colonial-era trash. Deeper down, Mayan pottery and jade. At the very bottom, amidst the tree trunks that have fallen in over thousands of years, lie the bones of the Ice Age megafauna, mastodons and sloths, and the skeletons of the earliest humans in the Americas, preserved in the cold, dark, mineral-rich water. These are vertical time tunnels, preserving a continuous record of spiritual and geological history in a single shaft of water. The preservation of human remains underwater depends heavily on the pH and calcium content of the water. In acidic water, bones dissolve quickly, leaving perhaps only the enamel of the teeth, which is the hardest substance in the human body. In alkaline or neutral environments, especially those covered in sediment, skeletons can be remarkably well preserved. Archaeologists study these bones to determine the diet, disease, and origin of the sailors. Strontium isotope analysis of the teeth can reveal where a person grew up. A skeleton found on a shipwreck is a biological logbook, recording the life history of a sailor who drowned centuries ago, from the food he ate as a child to the repetitive strain injuries he suffered hauling ropes on the deck. Finally, we must consider the sensory experience of the underwater archaeologist. It is a silent profession. Communication is limited to hand signals and the scratching of a pencil on a plastic slate. The only sound is the rhythmic inhalation and exhalation of the regulator, a mechanical breathing that becomes a metronome for the work. The diver is weightless, hovering over the site like an astronaut. They must control their buoyancy perfectly. A sudden drop can crush a fragile artifact, and a sudden rise can cause decompression sickness. They work in a blue, liquid, slow motion, suspended between the surface and the bottom, alien visitors in a world that belongs to the past. The isolation is profound. In that silence, focused on a single square meter of mud, the gap between the present and the ancient world seems to vanish, leaving only the diver and the object they are gently fanning free from the sands of time. The submerged landscape of Doggerland offers a haunting perspective on human history, revealing that the map of Europe is a fluid concept rather than a permanent fixture. During the Mesolithic period, roughly 10,000 years ago, the North Sea was not a sea at all, but a vast, fertile plain connecting Britain to the Netherlands and Denmark. It was a tundra-like landscape of rolling hills, meandering rivers, and freshwater lakes, populated by herds of mammoth, red deer, and hunter-gatherer communities. Today, this world lies beneath the cold, grey waves, accessible only to the dredgers and trawlers that scrape the bottom. Fishermen in the North Sea frequently pull up the fossilized bones of woolly rhinos and the antler harpoons of the people who lived there. These artifacts are not found in stratigraphic layers, but are tumbled together by the currents, a chaotic museum of a drowned world. The preservation of peat bogs on the seabed suggests that there were once forests here. Divers have found tree stumps still rooted in the ancient soil, the wood blackened and compressed, but still recognizable as oak or birch. It is a ghost forest that only fish swim through, a reminder that for thousands of years, our ancestors walked dry-shod from London to Berlin across land that was stolen by the melting ice. The final destruction of Doggerland was likely accelerated by the Storegga Slide, one of the largest underwater landslides in known geological history. Around 6200 BC, a massive section of the continental shelf off the coast of Norway collapsed, sending some 3,000 cubic kilometers of sediment sliding into the abyss. This displacement generated a mega tsunami that raced across the North Sea. For the inhabitants of the low-lying marshlands of Doggerland, the horizon would have suddenly darkened as a wall of water, perhaps 20 meters high, swept in from the north. The wave decimated the coastline, drowning the settlements and salting the freshwater lakes. Archaeological evidence found in Scotland and the Faroes shows layers of sand deposited by this event far inland. The slide marked the violent end of the land bridge, turning Britain into an island and severing the walking routes of the ancient world. It is a geological trauma recorded in the mud, a single afternoon of violence that redrew the coastline of a continent. Traveling east to the Black Sea, we encounter a body of water that acts as the world's largest preservative jar due to its unique chemical stratification. The Black Sea is meromictic, meaning the layers of water do not mix. The top layer is brackish and oxygenated, fed by rivers like the Danube. But below a depth of about 200 meters, the water is permanently anoxic, completely devoid of oxygen. This dead zone is saturated with hydrogen sulfide, a toxic chemical that prevents the growth of wood-boring worms and bacteria. Ships that sink into this abyssal layer do not rot. They sit on the bottom in perfect darkness, their masts still standing, their ropes still coiled on the deck, and the adze marks of the carpenters still visible on the beams. Wrecks discovered here dating back to the Byzantine and Ottoman empires look as if they sank yesterday. The lack of oxygen has mummified the wood, preserving intricate carvings and even the beeswax used to seal the hulls. It is a museum of the dark, where a wooden ship can last for thousands of years, suspended in a poisonous, preservative gloom. One specific wreck in the Black Sea, known as the Sinop D wreck, dates to the 5th century AD and offers a startling glimpse into the aesthetics of ancient shipbuilding. The ship's mast is still standing tall, reaching up into the water column. But the most breathtaking detail is the carving on the stern post. Even after 1,500 years, the intricate patterns of the wood carving are crisp and sharp. The ropes used for the rigging are still draped over the beams, not as disintegrated dust, but as fibrous strands that look ready to be pulled. This level of preservation allows archaeologists to study the knots used by ancient sailors, a detail of technology that is almost never preserved. We can see how they tied their lines, how they spliced their ropes, and how they secured their loads. The Sinop D is a masterclass in maritime technology, held in stasis by the chemistry of the deep, a silent witness to the skills of the Roman-era rigger. The deterioration of the RMS Titanic, resting at a depth of 3,800 meters in the North Atlantic, stands in stark contrast to the preservation of the Black Sea wrecks. The Titanic is being consumed by a specialized community of bacteria known as Halomonas titanici. These microbes feed on iron. They form porous, icicle-like structures called rusticles that hang from the steel plating of the ship. These rusticles are not solid rust. They are complex bacterial cities with water channels and fungal networks. They are slowly eating the ship, converting the massive steel hull into a fine powder of oxidized iron that drifts away in the current. The bacteria are recycling the most famous ship in history back into the ocean floor. Experts estimate that within a few decades, the wreck will collapse entirely, reduced to a stain of rust on the sediment. It is a slow-motion digestion, a biological reclamation of the metal that was torn from the earth, forged in fire, and is now returning to the geological cycle through the appetite of a microbe. Surrounding the wreck of the Titanic lies a debris field that contains a poignant and specific type of artifact. Pairs of shoes lying side by side on the mud. The leather of the shoes has been tanned and treated, making it resistant to the hungry deep-sea life. However, the human bodies that once wore them have long since dissolved, their bones consumed by the calcium-hungry water and scavengers. The heavy leather shoes, weighted down by their heels, settled to the bottom exactly where the Tahitian person landed. They remain there, arranged in the position of feet, marking the final resting place of a passenger or crew member. These grave markers of leather are the only physical evidence of the human cost of the tragedy remaining on the seabed. They are silent, durable witnesses to the loss, pairs of empty vessels pointing toe up in the eternal dark, undisturbed by the currents that have erased everything else. The conservation of artifacts raised from the sea involves a process of electrolysis that can take decades to complete. When an iron cannon or an anchor is brought to the surface after centuries underwater, it is saturated with chloride ions from the salt. If allowed to dry, these chlorides react with oxygen to cause rapid, catastrophic corrosion. The metal will literally flake apart and turn to dust before your eyes. To stop this, conservators place the object in a tank of electrolytic solution and run a weak electric current through it. The electricity forces the chloride ions to migrate out of the metal and into the water. This process is agonizingly slow. A large cannon might need to sit in the tank, bubbling gently, for 5 or 10 years. It is a therapy of patience, using the flow of electrons to reverse the chemical damage of the ocean, coaxing the salt out of the iron molecule by molecule until it is stable enough to sit in a museum. For organic materials, like the leather shoes of the Titanic or the timbers of the Mary Rose, the conservation method of choice is often freeze-drying. After the object has been impregnated with a waxy stabilizer like polyethylene glycol, PEG, it is placed in a massive vacuum chamber and frozen. The pressure is then lowered, causing the frozen water inside the cells of the leather or wood to sublimate, turning directly from solid ice to gas without becoming liquid. This prevents the cell walls from collapsing due to the surface tension of liquid water. The result is a dry, stable object that retains its original shape and texture. It is the same technology used to make instant coffee, applied to the preservation of history. A freeze-dried leather satchel from a shipwreck feels surprisingly light, a dehydrated shadow of the object it once was, frozen in time by the removal of the very water that tried to destroy it. The submerged Roman city of Baiae, located in the Bay of Naples, offers a surreal experience of swimming through a luxury resort that time forgot. Baiae was the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, a place of thermal baths, illicit affairs, and imperial villas. Due to a geological phenomenon known as bradycism, the gradual rise and fall of the Earth's crust caused by the filling and emptying of magma chambers underground, the land slowly sank into the sea. Today, divers can swim along the paved Roman roads, past the statues of emperors that now act as reefs for colorful fish. The most striking features are the intricate mosaic floors. These black and white tiled masterpieces, depicting dolphins, wrestlers, and geometric patterns, are still intact on the seabed. Archaeologists scrub the algae off them to reveal their patterns, creating a window into the past where the opulence of Rome meets the blue silence of the Mediterranean. It is a city where the streets are paved with history, and the pedestrians are schools of damselfish. The construction of the Roman harbour at Caesarea Maritima in Israel reveals the secret of Roman concrete, a material so durable that it actually gets stronger underwater. The Romans used a volcanic ash called pozzolana mixed with lime to create their hydraulic concrete. When this mixture interacts with seawater, a chemical reaction occurs. The salt water dissolves the volcanic glass, allowing a rare mineral called aluminous tobamorite to grow in the concrete matrix. These mineral crystals interlock like microscopic armor, reinforcing the structure and preventing cracks from spreading. Unlike modern concrete, which degrades in salt water, Roman concrete heals itself. The massive breakwaters of Caesarea have withstood the pounding of the Mediterranean surf for 2,000 years. They are monolithic blocks of chemistry that turned the destructive power of the sea into a hardening agent, a testament to an engineering wisdom that we are only just beginning to rediscover. In the shallow fjord of Roskilde in Denmark, the Skuldelev ships provide a masterclass in Viking strategy and sacrifice. These 5 Viking ships were not lost in a storm. They were deliberately scuttled. Around the year 1070, the people of Roskilde filled these old, retired warships and cargo vessels with stones and sank them in a narrow channel of the fjord. They did this to create an underwater barrier to block enemy fleets from attacking the city. For nearly 1,000 years, the ships lay in the mud, acting as a skeletal wall. When they were excavated, archaeologists had to build a cofferdam around the site and pump out the water, revealing the ghostly outlines of the longships piled on top of one another. The wood was soft as cheese, but the elegant lines of the clinker-built hulls were preserved. These ships were sacrificed to save the city, their final voyage being a straight drop to the bottom to become a fortress of wood and stone. The recovery of the Confederate submarine H.L. Hunley off the coast of South Carolina solved a century-old mystery with a grim discovery. The Hunley was the first submarine in history to sink an enemy ship, the USS Housatonic, in 1864. However, the Hunley vanished immediately after the attack. When it was raised in 2000 and opened by archaeologists, they found the skeletons of the 8 crew members still sitting at their stations. There was no sign of panic. They were not clawing at the hatches. They appeared to have died peacefully. The leading theory is that the shockwave from their own torpedo, which was mounted on a spar only shortly ahead of the submarine, caused immediate, fatal lung trauma to the crew. They were knocked unconscious instantly by the blast pressure wave and drifted to the bottom, entombed in their iron tube. Inside the sub, archaeologists found a gold coin carried by the captain, Lieutenant George Dixon, which had saved his life at the Battle of Shiloh by stopping a bullet. The coin, bent by the impact, was still in his pocket, a talisman of luck that finally ran out in the cold water of the Atlantic. The technological leap of photogrammetry has revolutionized the way we map these underwater sites, turning thousands of flat photographs into immersive 3D models. An underwater archaeologist swims over a shipwreck, taking thousands of high-resolution photos from every conceivable angle. Back in the lab, powerful software analyzes the parallax, the slight shift in perspective between images, to calculate the exact position of every pixel in 3-dimensional space. This creates a point cloud of millions of data points that forms a hyper-realistic digital replica of the wreck. We can now walk through the Titanic or the Thistlegorm wreck in virtual reality, measuring the deformation of the hull to the millimeter without ever getting wet. This digital preservation allows us to strip away the water and see the ship as it truly lies on the seabed, revealing patterns of destruction that are invisible to the diver's eye in the murky gloom. Dating a shipwreck often relies on the science of dendrochronology or tree ring dating, which can pinpoint the felling of a tree to the exact year. Oak trees grow with a distinct pattern of wide and narrow rings, depending on the weather of each year. By measuring the ring patterns in the timbers of a shipwreck and matching them to a master chronology of European oak, archaeologists can determine exactly when the tree was cut down to build the ship. This works even for wood that has been underwater for centuries. For example, a ship found in the Thames mud might be dated to the spring of 1574, based on the final ring under the bark. This technique connects the sunken vessel to the forest it came from, linking the maritime history of the ship to the climatic history of the land, reading the biography of the wood to find the birthday of the boat. The stacking of amphorae on a Roman wreck is not random. It is a lesson in the geometry of friction and mass. The pointed bottoms of the amphorae, often seen as a design flaw by modern eyes, were actually crucial for stability. The bottom layer of jars was packed into the ballast sand or wooden racks in the hold. The next layer was stacked in the gaps between the necks of the first layer, interlocking like a honeycomb. This quincunx pattern distributed the weight evenly and prevented the cargo from shifting as the ship rolled in the waves. A ship could carry thousands of liters of wine and oil secure in this ceramic matrix. When the ship sinks and the wood rots away, the amphorae often retain this stacking pattern on the seabed, a ghostly outline of the ship's hold made of clay jars, preserving the shape of the hull that is no longer there. The evolution of the anchor provides a timeline of maritime technology written in stone and iron on the sea floor. The earliest anchors were simply heavy stones with a hole drilled in them, known as composite anchors. Later, lead stocks were added to wood to create the classic Admiralty shape. Finding a stone anchor on a reef can indicate a Bronze Age site, while an iron stock anchor points to the age of sail. There are anchor graveyards in the Mediterranean, where ships, caught in a sudden storm, would cut their anchor cables to escape the lee shore. These clusters of abandoned anchors mark the spots of ancient panic, the places where captains made the split-second decision to sacrifice their most valuable tool to save their ship, leaving a heavy iron footprint on the bottom as the price of survival. The sunken pirate city of Port Royal in Jamaica holds a specific artifact that captures the exact moment of its doom: a pocket watch. When the earthquake struck in 1692, the city liquefied and slid into the sea. Excavators in the 1960s found a watch in the ruins, its internal gears encrusted with coral and corrosion. X-ray imaging revealed that the hands of the watch had stopped precisely at 11:43. This physical timestamp corroborates the written accounts of the earthquake. It is a mechanical memory of the catastrophe, a device built to measure the passage of time that was frozen by the Earth itself, marking the minute the wickedest city on Earth was pulled underwater. The wreck of the Spanish galleon San Jose, discovered off the coast of Colombia, represents the holy grail of shipwrecks, carrying a cargo worth billions. But it is also a submerged battlefield of international law. The ship was carrying gold, silver, and emeralds from the mines of the Andes when it was sunk by the British in 1708. Today, it lies at a depth of 600 meters. The dispute over who owns it involves the Colombian government, the Spanish government. It was a state ship. Indigenous groups, the gold was mined from their land, and the salvage company that found it. The wreck is a political time bomb. The treasure is so vast it could alter the economy of a nation. Yet, it sits in the darkness, guarded by autonomous underwater vehicles and legal writs, a reminder that the greed that drove the galleon's voyage is still alive and well 3 centuries later. The colonization of a shipwreck by deep-sea corals turns the tragedy of a sinking into the birth of an ecosystem. An iron hull offers a hard substrate in the soft, muddy expanse of the deep ocean. Deep water corals, sponges, and anemones settle on the metal. Over decades, the ship is transformed into an artificial reef. The structure of the Titanic is draped in rusticles that look like icicles but are alive. The wreck of the SS Thistlegorm in the Red Sea is covered in soft corals that bloom in currents. The ship becomes a nursery for fish and a hunting ground for sharks. The sharp, industrial lines of the vessel are softened by the organic growth, blurring the line between the artifact and the reef. The ocean adopts the intruder, covering the steel wounds with a bandage of living color. The soundscape of a deep-water excavation is dominated by the rhythmic, electronic ping of the sonar positioning system. Submersibles and ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, navigate the pitch-black site using acoustic transponders placed on the seabed. These beacons emit a high-pitched chirp every few seconds. To the pilot in the control room, this sound is the heartbeat of the operation. It tells them exactly where the robot is in relation to the fragile wreck. Outside the hull, in the crushing dark, the sound waves travel for miles, a digital metronome keeping time in a world without sun. The silence of the deep is punctuated by this technological pulse, a signal that humanity is present, watching and measuring the ruins of its own history in the abyss. The formation of a shipwreck site is a geological process as much as a historical one, governed by a set of physical laws known as site formation processes. When a ship hits the seabed, it does not simply sit there. It interacts with the sediment dynamics of the ocean floor. If the current is strong, it creates a scour pit. The water accelerates as it flows around the obstruction of the hull, eroding the sand away from the sides of the ship. The wreck slowly digs its own grave, settling deeper into the trench it has created. Over centuries, the upper works of the ship, the masts, the deck cabins, the rigging, are usually destroyed by wood-boring worms and the physical battering of storms. They collapse inward or are swept away. The lower hull, however, protected by the scour pit and the eventual backfilling of sand, remains. What an archaeologist often finds is not a ship shape, but a tumulus, a low, oval mound on the seafloor, indistinguishable from a rock to the untrained eye, but hiding the flattened, preserved timbers of the keel beneath layers of protective, anaerobic sediment. In the waters off the coast of Cyprus, the Kyrenia shipwreck provides the finest example of the shell-first construction method used by ancient Greek shipbuilders. Dating to the 4th century BC, the time of Alexander the Great, this merchant ship reveals that the ancients built their vessels in a way that is backward to modern minds. They did not build a skeleton of ribs and then nail planks to it. Instead, they built the outer shell first, joining the planks edge to edge using thousands of mortise and tenon joints locked with wooden pegs. The ribs were inserted later, merely to reinforce the hull. This method required an extraordinary level of craftsmanship. The hull was a self-supporting piece of floating furniture before the internal frame was even added. Inside the Kyrenia hull, archaeologists found thousands of almonds, preserved in jars, still retaining their shells, along with millstones used as ballast. The discovery of these millstones suggests a trade route that included grinding grain on the move or selling heavy machinery, painting a picture of a slow, heavy merchantman trundling through the Aegean, selling nuts and stones to the islanders before succumbing to pirates or a squall. The excavation of the La Belle, the flagship of the French explorer Robert Cavelier de la Salle, in Matagorda Bay, Texas, required a feat of engineering that turned the ocean floor into dry land. Instead of diving, the archaeologists built a massive cofferdam around the wreck site. They drove 2 concentric walls of steel sheet, piling into the mud of the bay, and filled the gap between them with sand. Then, they pumped the millions of gallons of seawater out of the center. The result was a dry hole in the middle of the ocean. Archaeologists could walk on the seabed in their boots, using trowels and brushes, just as they would on land. This dry excavation allowed for the recovery of incredibly fragile artifacts that would have disintegrated in the current, such as a complete skeleton of a crew member with a coil of rope still lying next to him, and crates of muskets still packed in grease. The La Belle was a time capsule of a failed colony, its contents revealing the desperate, undersupplied reality of French ambitions in the New World, brought to light by pushing the sea back with walls of steel. One of the most chemically fascinating phenomena in underwater archaeology is the formation of concretions. When iron objects, like cannonballs, swords, or nails, rust in seawater, they react with the surrounding environment. The iron oxidizes and expands, cementing the sand, shells, and pebbles around it into a hard, rock-like crust. Over centuries, the original iron object inside often completely dissolves, turning into a liquid slurry that washes away, leaving behind a hollow void in the exact shape of the object. To the naked eye, a concretion looks like a shapeless lump of rock. However, archaeologists use X-rays to see the ghost inside. By drilling a small hole into the concretion and pouring in liquid rubber or epoxy, They can create a perfect cast of the lost object. They then crack the rock open to reveal a rubber replica of a pistol or a key, preserving the form of the artifact, even though the metal itself is long gone. It is a process of recovering the negative space of history, finding the shape of the past trapped in stone. The recovery of the Geldermalsen, a Dutch East India Company ship that sank in 1752, sparked a fierce ethical debate about the difference between salvage and archaeology. The ship, known as the Nanking Cargo, was carrying over 150,000 pieces of blue and white porcelain and gold ingots. It was found by commercial salvors, not academics. They used mechanical grabs to haul up the porcelain, destroying the hull and the context of the site in their haste to sell the china at auction. The gold ingots were particularly unique. They were shaped like a Chinese shoe or a boat, known as saisi. While the auction was a financial success, dispersing the cargo to collectors worldwide, the archaeological data, the stowage plan, the crew's possessions, the details of the hull was largely lost. The Geldermalsen serves as a cautionary tale of the treasure hunter mentality, where the monetary value of the cargo eclipses the historical value of the ship, turning a unique cultural document into a pile of pretty dishes for sale. The exploration of the Titanic's debris field utilizes the archaeology of the abyss, a discipline that relies entirely on remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, to be the hands and eyes of the scientist. The debris field covers a vast area of the seabed, a fan-shaped scatter of objects created by the hydrodynamics of sinking. Heavy objects like the boilers and the engines dropped straight down, acting as anchors for the map. Lighter objects, like plates, shoes, and paper, drifted for miles in the current as they sank, settling gently on the sediment. This hydrodynamic sorting creates patterns that tell the story of the ship's breakup. By mapping the position of every teacup and piece of coal, archaeologists can reconstruct the violent forces of the sinking. The ROV glides over this field like a silent drone, photographing the tragedy in high resolution. The preservation in the deep cold is startling. ROVs have spotted a pair of boots lying next to a coat, arranged as if a person were still wearing them, the body having dissolved away to leave only the tanned leather clothing behind in the dark. The submerged Neolithic site of Atlit Yam off the coast of Israel offers a glimpse into a Stone Age community that was drowned by the rising sea levels after the last ice age. Dating back 9,000 years, this village includes stone houses, paved courtyards, and a megalithic stone circle that functions like a miniature underwater Stonehenge. The preservation is exceptional due to the protective layer of sand. Archaeologists have found the skeletons of the villagers buried under the floors of their houses. Pathological analysis of these bones revealed the earliest known cases of tuberculosis in humans, as well as ear damage consistent with free-diving for shellfish. The most poignant feature is a deep water well. As the sea level rose, the groundwater became salty, and the well was abandoned, filled with trash by the villagers before they fled. This trash, animal bones, broken tools, provides a perfect stratigraphic record of the village's final days, a timeline of a losing battle against the encroaching Mediterranean. The concept of in situ preservation is the guiding philosophy of modern underwater archaeology, challenging the instinct to bring everything to the surface. Raising a shipwreck is incredibly expensive and risky. The wood can crumble, and the iron can explode with corrosion. Often, the best way to save a site is to leave it alone. Archaeologists will excavate a trench to study the ship, record it, and then deliberately rebury it. They cover the wood with sandbags, specialized majestic geotextiles, and mesh to protect it from currents and looters. The seabed is viewed not as a grave to be robbed, but as a stable, low-oxygen storage facility. By reburying the wreck, they preserve it for future generations who may have better technology to raise it. It is a discipline of restraint, where the greatest success is often to touch the past and then tuck it back into bed, leaving it to sleep in the dark for another century. In the limestone cenotes of the Yucatan, divers encounter a mesmerizing optical phenomenon known as a halocline, where fresh water meets salt water. The fresh water, coming from rain and underground rivers, sits on top of the denser salt water that seeps in from the ocean through the rock. The boundary between the two layers is distinct and visible, looking like a shimmering mirror or a layer of oil suspended in the water. Swimming through it causes a sudden blurring of vision as the different refractive indices mix. This chemical stratification affects preservation. Organic materials like wood or bone might be perfectly preserved in the freshwater layer, but dissolve in the saltwater layer below, or vice versa. A skeleton lying across the halocline might be half preserved and half eroded. The cenote is a dual-layered archive, a vertical column of water where the chemistry of history changes with every meter of depth. The sculpture program of the warship Vasa was not just decoration, it was a heavy political billboard that contributed to the ship's instability. The ship was top-heavy, laden with hundreds of gilded and painted sculptures made of heavy oak. These figures depicted Roman emperors, Greek gods, and the Lion of the North, King Gustavus Adolphus himself. Recent chemical analysis of the microscopic paint traces remaining on the wood has revealed that the Vasa was not the dark natural wood we see today. It was a riot of garish colors, bright reds, golds, blues, and skin tones. It was a gaudy, floating palace designed to intimidate the enemy with its opulence. The weight of this art, combined with the extra row of cannon ports ordered by the king, raised the center of gravity so high that a stiff breeze tipped the ship over. The Vasa was sunk by its own vanity, a masterpiece of art that was a failure of engineering. The physiological peril of the bends, or decompression sickness, has haunted divers and caisson workers for centuries, influencing how archaeology is conducted. When a diver breathes compressed air at depth, nitrogen dissolves into their tissues. If they ascend too quickly, the pressure drops, and the nitrogen comes out of solution as bubbles, like opening a soda bottle. These bubbles can block blood vessels, cause joint pain, paralysis, or death. The history of this understanding comes from the construction of bridges like the Brooklyn Bridge, where workers in pressurized caissons fell ill with caisson disease. In archaeology, avoiding the bends dictates the entire schedule of the excavation. A diver might spend only 20 minutes on a deep wreck like the Uluburun, but must spend hours hanging on a decompression line in the open water to off-gas. Modern divers use Doppler ultrasound to listen to their own blood after a dive, hearing the silent bubbles pinging in their veins, a ghostly reminder of the gas trapped in their bodies. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from the wreck of a Roman cargo ship, is a device of such complexity that it seems to fall out of the future. It is a clockwork machine made of 30 bronze gears, dating to the 2nd century BC. For decades, it was just a lump of green corrosion. Advanced X-ray tomography revealed the internal structure, a differential gear system that could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, as well as the dates of eclipses, and even the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It is essentially an astronomical computer. The existence of this device proves that the Greeks possessed a level of mechanical engineering that was lost for 1,000 years, not reappearing until the mechanical clocks of medieval Europe. The mechanism was likely a luxury item, perhaps looted by the Romans from a Greek city, destined for the mantle of a rich senator before the sea claimed it. It is a piece of intellectual history that was saved by the catastrophe of a shipwreck. The vast trade in garum, the fermented fish sauce that was the ketchup of the Roman Empire, is visible in the stacking patterns of amphorae on Mediterranean wrecks. Garum was made by fermenting fish guts and salt in the sun for months. It was a staple of the Roman diet. Wrecks carrying garum amphorae reveal the scale of this smelly industry. The jars often bear painted inscriptions called tituli picti, ancient product labels written in red or black ink. These labels list the producer, the weight, the quality of the sauce, e.g., flour of garum, and the merchant's name. Reading a titulus pictus on a jar at the bottom of the sea is like reading a receipt from a grocery store in ancient Rome. It connects the wreck to a specific person and a specific business transaction, turning a pile of pottery into a record of the daily appetite of an empire. The excavation of the Queen Anne's Revenge, the flagship of the pirate Blackbeard off the coast of North Carolina, has yielded a surprising mix of violence and healing. Among the cannons and lead shot, archaeologists found a urethral syringe containing traces of mercury. This was the standard, painful treatment for syphilis in the 18th century. They also found a mortar and pestle, weights for measuring medicine, and French medical textbooks. This suggests that Blackbeard's ship was well stocked with medical supplies, likely stolen from other ships or commanded by a captured surgeon. It paints a picture of the pirate life that is less about romance and more about the grim reality of disease. The Terror of the Seas was also a floating clinic, struggling to keep its crew alive in the face of venereal disease and infection, a ship of sick men looking for a cure as much as for gold. The recovery of the windlass from ancient shipwrecks reveals the sheer physical effort required to sail before the age of steam. The windlass was a massive horizontal winch used to raise the heavy iron anchors. It was powered by human muscle. Sailors would insert wooden bars into the windlass and push, walking in a circle or heaving back and forth. On a large ship, raising the anchor could take hours of back-breaking labor. Finding the windlass on a wreck, often a huge log of oak reinforced with iron bands, gives archaeologists a focal point for understanding the crew's exertion. The wood is often worn smooth, where generations of hands gripped it. It is a monument to the calorie-burning reality of the wooden world, where every movement of the ship was paid for in sweat. The Sunken shipwreck, discovered off the coast of South Korea, offers a pristine snapshot of East Asian trade in the 14th century. The ship was a Chinese junk bound for Japan, packed with over 20,000 pieces of Celadon pottery. The mud of the Yellow Sea preserved the cargo perfectly. What makes the Sunken unique is the discovery of hundreds of wooden tags with ink writing still legible on them. These tags acted as shipping manifests and address labels, listing the contents of the crates and the names of the merchants in Japan who ordered them. They provide a direct look into the logistics of the medieval Silk Road of the sea. Archaeologists also found bamboo knitting needles and seeds of medicinal plants, intimate details of the crew's life and the goods they valued. The Sunken is a floating department store of the Yuan dynasty, preserved in the silt. The discovery of bog bodies in submerged landscapes links underwater archaeology to the peat bogs of Europe and North America. At the Windover archaeological site in Florida, a peat bog at the bottom of a pond yielded the skeletons of 168 individuals dating back 7,000 years. The water chemistry of the peat, neutral pH and anaerobic, preserved the organic material to an astonishing degree. Archaeologists found intact brain tissue inside the skulls, allowing for DNA analysis. They also found woven fabrics made of plant fibers, the oldest textiles in the Americas. These bodies were not murder victims like the European bog bodies, but carefully buried ancestors, staked down into the peat of the pond floor. The dark water of the bog acted as a sacred preservative, keeping the soft tissues of the ancient Floridians intact long after the pyramids had crumbled to dust. The evolution of excavation techniques from dredging to airlifting marks the maturation of the discipline, from looting to science. In the early days, sponge divers and salvors would use heavy claws or dynamite to break apart wrecks to get at the copper and bronze. The Antikythera site was heavily damaged by the clumsy boots and heavy lifting of the initial recovery. Today, the airlift allows for surgical precision. A diver can remove a single layer of sand grains from a delicate wooden comb without scratching it. The airlift sucks the debris up a tube and deposits it into a sieve on a barge, where every tiny fragment, seeds, beads, fish bones, is caught and catalogued. This shift reflects a change in value. We no longer want just the statue. We want the context, the dirt, and the debris that tell the story of the moment the ship died. On many ancient wrecks, divers encounter the phenomenon of the amphora wall or the concretion reef. Over thousands of years, the cargo of clay jars settles and is colonized by marine life. Calcareous worms, bryozoans, and coralline algae grow over the pots, cementing them together into a solid rock-like mass. To excavate, archaeologists essentially have to dismantle a reef. They use pneumatic chisels to carefully separate the jars from the biological cement. It is a process of unbuilding a natural structure to find the artificial one underneath. The amphorae are often so fused that they have become part of the geology of the seafloor, a ceramic stratum in the rock record of the ocean. Finally, for this section, we must touch upon the emotional weight of personal effects. While gold and cannons capture the headlines, it is the small personal items that silence the excavation team. Finding a leather shoe with the imprint of a heel still visible, or a wooden comb with strands of human hair caught in the teeth, collapses the centuries in an instant. These objects transform the wreck from a historical site into a scene of human tragedy. A pocket watch stopped at the moment of sinking, a child's toy, a sailor's pipe with teeth marks on the stem. These are the ghosts of the deep. They remind the archaeologist that they are intruding on a grave. The act of touching these items is a form of time travel, a tactile connection to a person who lived, breathed, and died in the water, leaving behind only these small, waterproof testimonies to their existence. The tragic tale of the Nemi ships, two colossal floating palaces built by the Emperor Caligula, serves as a poignant reminder that archaeology is often at the mercy of modern war. These ships, moored in the small volcanic lake of Nemi near Rome, were not mere vessels. They were floating temples, adorned with marble columns, mosaic floors, and heating systems, designed for the emperor's hedonistic pleasure. For centuries, local fishermen hooked up pieces of wood and bronze, fueling legends of a sunken city. In an unprecedented archaeological engineering project in the 1920s, the Italian government, under Mussolini, ordered the lake to be drained. As the water receded, the massive hulls, 70 meters long, emerged from the mud where they had rested for 1900 years. They were remarkably intact, revealing advanced naval technology like ball bearings and rotating platforms that historians thought were invented centuries later. They were housed in a lakeside museum, a triumph of recovery. However, in 1944, during the retreat of German forces in World War II, the museum was consumed by fire. The ships were reduced to ash. The archaeology of the Nemi ships is now an archaeology of loss. We study the photographs and the few surviving bronze fittings to reconstruct the grandeur that was recovered from the water, only to be destroyed by the fire of the surface world. On the windswept coral reefs of the Houtman Abrolhos Islands off Western Australia, The wreck of the Batavia tells a story of mutiny and massacre that is etched into the very stones of the seabed. The Batavia, a Dutch East India Company ship, wrecked in 1629. The survivors made it to a bleak coral island where a psychopathic under-merchant named Geronimus Cornelis orchestrated a reign of terror, murdering over 100 men, women, and children. Archaeologists excavating the site found not just the ship, but the evidence of the horror. They uncovered the skeletons of the victims in shallow graves, their bones bearing the distinct cut marks of swords and the blunt trauma of maces. But the most surreal artifact recovered was a massive stone portico, a prefabricated stone gate intended for the headquarters of the company in Batavia, Jakarta. The huge blocks of sandstone were being transported as ballast. When the ship struck the reef, the gate tumbled into the sea. Archaeologists raised these blocks, numbering in the hundreds, and reassembled the gate in a museum. It stands today as a doorway to nowhere, a grand entrance that traveled thousands of miles, only to witness a nightmare on a desolate reef. The excavation of the wider galley off Cape Cod introduced the world to the reality of pirate archaeology, stripping away the romance to reveal the grit of the trade. The wider is the only fully authenticated Golden Age pirate shipwreck ever discovered. When divers first located the site, they found a seabed littered with what looked like grey loaves of bread. These were concretions, masses of sand and iron fused together. Inside these lumps, however, was the glitter of gold. Because gold is a noble metal, it does not corrode or react with the iron. X-rays of the concretions revealed gold dust, Akan jewelry from Africa, and thousands of pieces of 8, all trapped in the iron matrix. Extracting these items requires a delicate microscopic chiseling process. Among the treasures, archaeologists found the leg bone of a young boy, a short individual, likely a powder monkey, wearing a silk stocking and a leather shoe. This single, small shoe brings the reality of the pirate crew into sharp focus. They were not just legends, but varied and often desperate people, some of them children, living and dying on the edge of the law. In the murky waters of the Rhône River in Arles, France, the recovery of the Arles-Rhône 3 barge showcased the potential of riverine archaeology to preserve the mundane vessels of everyday commerce. This Roman barge, dating to the 1st century AD, was a flat-bottomed workhorse used to transport stones and goods. It sank while moored at the riverbank, rapidly covered by layers of fine river clay. This clay provided an anaerobic seal so perfect that the wood was still blonde and fresh when uncovered 2,000 years later. The boat was 31 meters long. To raise it, the team had to cut the hull into 10 sections while underwater, using a specialized chainsaw, because the wood was too fragile to lift in one piece. They then reassembled it in a museum and freeze-dried it. The barge is not a warship or a royal yacht. It is a truck of the ancient world. Its preservation allows us to see the wear patterns on the deck where the sailors walked and the specific tool marks of the shipwrights, offering a glimpse into the blue-collar labor that built the Roman Empire. The phenomenon of the ghost fleet of Chuk Lagoon in Micronesia presents an underwater archaeological site that is also a graveyard of the Second World War. During Operation Hailstone in 1944, American forces sank dozens of Japanese warships and merchant vessels in this sheltered lagoon. Today, the wrecks lie in clear, warm water, transformed into vibrant coral reefs. However, inside the holds, the preservation is eerie. Tanks, trucks, and fighter aircraft are stacked in the darkness, covered in silt. In the crew quarters, human remains are still found, along with sake bottles, shoes, and gas masks. The site is a protected war grave. Archaeologists mapping these wrecks must contend with the oil threat. As the steel hulls corrode after 80 years, the fuel tanks are beginning to leak. Globules of heavy oil rise to the ceiling of the wreck, trapped there like black mercury. The archaeology of Chuk is a race against environmental disaster, documenting the ships before they collapse and release their toxic cargo into the pristine lagoon. The discovery of the São José Paquete Africa, a Portuguese slave ship wrecked off Cape Town in 1794, marked a somber milestone in the archaeology of the transatlantic slave trade. The ship was carrying over 400 enslaved people from Mozambique when it struck rocks close to shore. Unlike other wrecks laden with porcelain or gold, the São José carried a cargo of human misery. Divers found iron ballast bars, heavy blocks used to stabilize the human cargo, and copper fastenings. But the most telling artifacts were the iron shackles. Finding these rusted fetters on the seabed transforms the site from a shipwreck into a crime scene. The turbulent, high-energy environment of the surf zone has ground much of the ship to dust, but the heavy iron ballast remains, a durable testament to the weight of the bodies that were shackled above it. The archaeology here is an act of memory, reclaiming the history of those who were considered lost cargo, giving a physical location to the Middle Passage tragedy. Deep within the limestone cliffs of the Mediterranean coast of France, the Cosca Cave offers a unique intersection of underwater exploration and Paleolithic art. The entrance to this cave is located 37 meters below the current sea level. During the last ice age, when sea levels were lower, prehistoric humans walked into the dry cave to paint on the walls. As the ice melted and the Mediterranean rose, the entrance was submerged, sealing the air-filled chamber inside. Divers who navigate the long, dangerous underwater tunnel surface in a cathedral of rock, covered in hand stencils and paintings of penguins, seals, and horses. The rising water has destroyed the lower paintings, leaving a waterline of destruction. The surviving art is preserved only because of the air pocket trapped by the seal of the ocean. It is a gallery that can only be visited by scuba divers, a secret museum of the Stone Age, guarded by the pressure of the sea. The specific challenge of conserving glass artifacts recovered from the sea involves a process known as devitrification. Ancient glass is not a stable solid. Over centuries in water, the chemical structure begins to break down. The alkali ions in the glass leach out, replaced by water molecules. This creates thin, onion skin layers of silica gel on the surface. When wet, the glass looks perfect, perhaps slightly iridescent. But if allowed to dry in the air, these hydrated layers craze and flake off, turning the object into a pile of shimmering dust. Archaeologists must keep the glass wet at all times. Conservation involves slowly replacing the water in the glass structure with a consolidant, often an acrylic resin, that hardens and binds the layers together. A Roman glass bowl found underwater is a ticking time bomb of chemistry, holding its shape only as long as it remains damp, requiring immediate and careful intervention to survive the transition to the museum shelf. The use of stone anchors in the Bronze Age provides a tangible link between maritime technology and religious belief. These anchors are simple heavy slabs of limestone or sandstone with a hole drilled at the top for a rope. They are found by the thousands on the seabed of the Mediterranean. However, they are also found in land temples used as votive offerings. A sailor who survived a terrible storm would dedicate his anchor to the deity of the temple, often inscribing it with symbols or prayers. Finding a stone anchor underwater marks a specific moment where a ship paused or where it was in distress and had to cut the line. A cluster of stone anchors on a reef is a map of ancient fear, marking a hazard that terrified the sailors of the Bronze Age, enough to make them sacrifice their only means of stopping. The wreck of the Vrouw Maria, a Dutch merchant ship that sank off the coast of Finland in 1771, holds a cargo that is the stuff of art history legends. The ship was carrying a collection of Dutch Golden Age paintings purchased by Catherine the Great of Russia for the Hermitage Museum. It sank intact in the cold, brackish waters of the Baltic. The ship sits upright on the bottom, its masts still standing. Inside the hold, packed in crates sealed with wax and lead, are the paintings. The environment inside the crates is likely anaerobic and stable. Archaeologists and conservators debate whether to raise them. Can canvas and oil paint survive 250 years underwater? The lead seals may have kept the water out entirely. The Vrouw Maria is a tantalizing sealed envelope, potentially holding masterpieces that have been hidden from the world for centuries, preserved in the dark, cold gallery of the ship's hold. The scatter pattern of coins on a shipwreck site is analyzed using statistical models to understand the violence of the wrecking event. Coins are small, dense, and aerodynamic in water. When a ship breaks up, the coins spill from the purser's chest or the passenger's pockets. In a high-energy site, they are scattered by the waves. Heavy gold coins tend to drop straight down and work their way into the bedrock cracks. Lighter silver coins flutter and drift further away. By mapping the distribution of every single coin, archaeologists can pinpoint where the ship first struck the reef and how it broke apart. A tight pile of coins suggests the chest stayed intact. A long trail suggests a violent breakup in the surf. The coins are the breadcrumbs of the disaster, leading the diver back to the point of impact. The study of pollen cores taken from the sediment inside and around a shipwreck allows archaeologists to reconstruct the environment the ship sailed through. Mud preserves pollen grains perfectly. By taking a core sample of the mud inside the bilge of a ship, scientists can identify the plants that were in the air when the ship was in port. They can tell if the ship was docked near a pine forest or an olive grove. They can identify the straw used to pack the cargo or the spices carried in the hold. This microscopic evidence creates an olfactory landscape of the past. It tells us what the air smelled like on the day the ship sailed, adding a layer of botanical detail to the wooden bones of the vessel. The identification of trade resin on Bronze Age shipwrecks, like the Uluburun, involves advanced gas chromatography to sniff out the ancient economy. The Uluburun ship carried over a ton of resin in amphorae. For years, it was unidentified. Chemical analysis revealed it to be resin from the Pistachia atlantica tree, known as terebinth. This resin was used for perfume, medicine, and wine preservation. Finding a ton of it proved that there was an industrial-scale trade in aromatics. It wasn't just small vials, it was bulk shipping. The resin, preserved in the cold water, still retains a faint, piney scent when brought to the surface, a ghost of the fragrance that would have permeated the temples and palaces of Egypt 3,000 years ago. The submerged Neolithic fish weirs of Denmark and Ireland reveal a prehistoric landscape of complex industrial fishing. As sea levels rose, these wooden fences and traps were drowned and preserved in the anaerobic mud. Some weirs are football field-sized structures made of hazel rods woven together like baskets. They date back 7,000 years. The preservation is so good that the tool marks of the flint axes used to cut the wood are still visible. These structures show that Stone Age people were not just wandering hunter-gatherers. They were engineers who modified their environment on a massive scale to harvest the sea. The weirs are underwater fences, mapping the property lines of a drowned society that relied on the tides to feed their families. The Ganges Sawai, a Mughal treasure ship captured by the pirate Henry Every, has never been found, but the search for it drives the development of new remote sensing technologies. The ship was laden with millions of dollars in gold and jewels. While the wreck itself is elusive, the search has led to the discovery of other trade ships in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. The hunt for specific, high-value targets often leads to the accidental discovery of historically significant, though less wealthy, vessels. This trickle-down archaeology means that the greed for gold often funds the science of history, as the expensive magnetometers and side-scan sonars sweep the ocean floor, revealing the ceramic-laden merchant ships that were the true lifeblood of the ancient economy. The ethical dilemma of human remains in underwater archaeology has shifted significantly in recent decades. In the past, skulls and bones were often treated as curiosities or specimens. Today, the seabed is increasingly viewed as a grave. When human remains are found, as in the case of the Mary Rose or the Hunley, the excavation stops and a discussion begins about the dignity of the dead. Are they scientific data or ancestors? The decision is often to leave them in situ if possible, or to rebury them with honors. The underwater archaeologist is a grave digger as well as a historian, and the silence of the site is respected as the silence of a tomb. The bones are the crew, still manning their posts, and the modern diver is an intruder in their final watch. The recovery of the turret of the USS Monitor, the famous Civil War ironclad, was a feat of heavy lifting that required a specialized spider claw. The Monitor sank in a storm off Cape Hatteras in 1862. It turned upside down as it sank, and the heavy revolving turret, the first of its kind, fell off and landed in the sand. To raise it, NOAA and the US Navy built a massive steel claw engine. They lifted the 120-ton iron cylinder from 240 feet of water. Inside the turret, buried in the silt, were the skeletons of 2 sailors who were still inside when the ship capsized. They also found a monkey wrench and a bottle of condiment sauce. The turret is now in a conservation tank, undergoing decades of electrochemical treatment to remove the salt. It is a monument to industrial warfare, a rusted iron cylinder that changed the history of naval combat, retrieved from the deep to rust no more. The geological marker of micro-debris is used to find shipwrecks that have completely disintegrated. Sometimes, a wooden ship is destroyed by worms and storms until nothing visible remains. However, the sediment around the site is filled with microscopic evidence. Tiny shards of pottery, flecks of rust, coal dust, and rat bones form a halo around the site. By taking core samples of the sand and looking for this anthropogenic spike in the strata, archaeologists can find the ghost of the ship. The wreck is gone, but the chemical and physical signature remains in the sand. It is forensic science applied to the seabed, hunting for the invisible stain of a ship that dissolved centuries ago. The concept of the shipscape, or maritime cultural landscape, expands archaeology beyond the wreck itself to the entire region. A shipwreck does not exist in isolation. It is connected to the lighthouse on the shore, the anchorage where it waited for the tide, and the port it was sailing to. Archaeologists now map the entire system: the submerged breakwaters, the piles of ballast dumped by ships waiting to load cargo, and the sacred promontories where sailors made offerings. This holistic view sees the ocean not as a barrier, but as a highway connected to the land. The wreck is just one point on a web of human activity that spans the horizon, a node in a network of trade, wind, and currents that defined the ancient world. The preservation of organic residue inside ceramic vessels allows us to reconstruct the ancient diet with molecular precision. A dull, unglazed pot found on a wreck might look empty, but the ceramic matrix has absorbed the fats and oils of its contents. Using gas chromatography mass spectrometry, scientists can identify the fatty acids of olive oil, the tartaric acid of wine, or the specific chemical signature of beeswax. They have found evidence of oregano-flavored wine, stewed beef, and pine resin used to seal the jars. This molecular archaeology brings the senses back to the wreck. We can smell the wine and taste the stew of the sailors who drowned 2,000 years ago, reconstructing the flavor profile of the past from the invisible molecules trapped in the clay. And finally, for this section, we consider the visual phenomenon of color absorption underwater, which dictates how an archaeologist sees the site. Water absorbs light, starting with the red end of the spectrum. By the time a diver reaches a depth of 30 meters, red, orange, and yellow are gone. Everything is a monochromatic blue-green. Blood looks green. A red piece of coral looks black. To see the true colors of a fresco or a painted vase, the diver must use an artificial light. When the torch is switched on, the colors explode out of the gloom. The brilliant red of the terra sigillata pottery, the gold of a coin, the blue of a glass bead. It is a moment of revelation. The artifacts have been sitting in the blue dark for centuries. And for a brief second, the light of the torch restores them to the world of color. A private sunrise created by the archaeologist in the deep. The discovery of the Palmwood wreck off the island of Texel in the Netherlands unveiled a textile treasure so fragile and luxurious that it seemed impossible it had survived the abrasive currents of the Wadden Sea for nearly 4 centuries. Buried deep in the sediment, archaeologists found a wardrobe belonging to a noblewoman from the early 17th century, including a silk damask dress that was almost perfectly intact. The dress is woven with a complex floral pattern, likely of Chinese or Italian origin, and retains its shimmering, creamy texture despite being submerged since 1660. The preservation mechanism here is the rapid burial in fine sand, which protected the fabric from the scouring action of the tides and the light that would fade its dyes. Alongside the dress were silk stockings, a velvet jacket, and a silver-gilt toilet set. Touching this fabric, which was once worn in the courts of Europe, collapses the distance of time completely. It is not a fossil or a piece of wood, but a soft, intimate garment that still holds the shape of the woman who wore it, preserved in a sandy drawer at the bottom of the sea. The long-term conservation of the warship Vasa has revealed a terrifying chemical enemy that threatens to destroy the ship from the inside out: sulfuric acid. During its centuries in the polluted waters of Stockholm Harbour, the timbers of the Vasa absorbed tons of sulfur from the sewage and the decaying organic matter in the mud. The sulfur penetrated deep into the cellular structure of the oak. Now, in the museum, as the humidity fluctuates and oxygen interacts with the wood, this sulfur is reacting with the iron from the original bolts to produce sulfuric acid. The ship is essentially digesting itself. White, crystalline salts of sulfate appear on the surface of the wood like a chemical frost. Conservators must constantly monitor the pH of the timber and apply neutralizing agents, fighting a slow-motion chemical war to stop the pride of the Swedish Navy from turning into a pile of acidic dust, a reminder that the ocean's chemistry follows the artifact even onto dry land. The practice of saturation diving allows archaeologists to live and work on the seabed for days or weeks at a time, bypassing the need for daily decompression. In a saturation system, the divers live in a pressurized habitat on the deck of a support ship or on the seafloor itself. Their bodies are saturated with inert gas, usually helium, at the pressure of the working depth. They commute to the shipwreck in a pressurized diving bell. This allows them to work for 8 hours a day at depths of hundreds of feet, where a surface-supplied diver could only stay for minutes. The atmosphere inside the habitat is squeaky and high-pitched due to the helium, but the isolation is absolute. They are living in a capsule of air surrounded by the crushing weight of the ocean, eating and sleeping in a world where the sun never rises, entirely dependent on the umbilical cords of gas and hot water that connect them to the surface world. The legal concept of the sovereign immunity of sunken warships creates a complex political landscape on the ocean floor. According to international law, a military vessel remains the property of the nation that launched it, regardless of how long ago it sank or where it lies. A Spanish galleon sunk in Florida waters is still the property of Spain. A German U-boat off the coast of North Carolina is still the property of Germany. This means that archaeologists cannot simply excavate a warship. They must negotiate treaties and obtain permissions from foreign governments. The shipwreck is a sovereign island of territory on the seabed, a piece of a foreign nation that happens to be underwater. This legal status protects these sites from looters, treating the wreck not as abandoned junk, but as a deployed military unit that is inextricably on eternal patrol. The impact of bottom trawling on underwater cultural heritage is a destructive force that rivals natural erosion, erasing history before it can be recorded. Industrial fishing trawlers drag heavy, weighted nets across the seafloor to catch fish like flounder and cod. These nets are equipped with rock hoppers, heavy rubber or steel discs designed to bounce over obstacles. When a trawler drags its gear over a wooden shipwreck, it acts like a belt sander. It smashes the protruding timbers, scatters the artifacts, and churns the sediment layers into a chaotic soup. Archaeologists often find wrecks that have been plowed with deep parallel scars running through the site. A Roman amphora pile might be leveled in seconds, the jars crushed into shards and spread over acres. It is the unintentional bulldozing of the Museum of the Deep, a conflict between the need to feed the present and the need to preserve the past. The future of deep-sea archaeology lies in the swarms of autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, that act as the silent cartographers of the abyss. These torpedo-shaped robots are programmed to swim in grid patterns just a few meters above the sea floor, scanning the terrain with high-resolution sonar and lasers. They can operate for 24 hours a day, covering vast areas of the abyssal plain that humans could never reach. They are the lawnmowers of discovery. When they return to the surface, they upload terabytes of data that reveal the seabed in photographic detail. These machines are finding wrecks that no one knew existed, ancient merchant ships that drifted off course and sank in the middle of nowhere, sitting alone in the darkness. The AUVs are stripping away the water, turning the opaque ocean into a transparent digital map where every anomaly is marked and catalogued. The wreck of the Mars, the flagship of the Swedish Navy that sank in 1564, exploded with such violence that it scattered debris across the Baltic seafloor in a way that allows archaeologists to reconstruct the physics of the blast. The Mars was the largest ship of its time, carrying over 100 bronze cannons. During a fierce battle, it caught fire and the gunpowder magazine ignited. The explosion blew the ship apart. Archaeologists diving on the site found massive oak timbers shattered like matchsticks and bronze cannons twisted by the heat. The distribution of the debris tells the story of the trajectory of the explosion. The preservation is so good that the charred wood still smells of smoke when brought to the surface. It is a forensic scene of 16th century naval warfare, a snapshot of a detonation frozen in the cold, brackish water. The excavation of the Narlit shipwreck off the coast of Croatia has provided a unique insight into the raw materials of the Renaissance art world. This Venetian merchant ship, which sank in 1583, was carrying a massive cargo of industrial materials bound for Constantinople. divers found tons of raw glass packed in barrels, sheets of brass, and barrels of white lead and vermilion, the pigments used by the great masters of Venetian painting. But the most toxic find was a cargo of arsenic and mercury used for medicine and cosmetics. The wreck is a chemical hazard. Archaeologists have to handle the sediment with extreme care. The knowledge reveals the dirty, industrial underbelly of the Renaissance, showing that the beauty of the paintings and the glasswork relied on a trade in dangerous, heavy chemicals shipped in bulk across the Mediterranean. The acoustic signature of a shipwreck changes over time, turning the vessel from a silent object into a noisy reef. When a ship first sinks, it is a foreign object, reflecting sound sharply. As it is colonized by marine life, the acoustic profile softens. The crunching of parrotfish eating the coral growing on the hull, the snapping of shrimp hiding in the hold, and the drumming of fish seeking shelter create a biological soundscape. An experienced sonar operator can sometimes tell the difference between a dead rock and a live shipwreck simply by the texture of the sound return. The ship becomes a musical instrument of the deep, resonating with the life that has claimed it, broadcasting a signal of biodiversity into the surrounding water. The phenomenon of the deep water preservative shadow suggests that there are zones in the ocean where organic preservation is nearly perfect due to the combination of extreme pressure, cold, and lack of oxygen. In the deep basins of the Black Sea and potentially the deep trenches of the ocean, the water is so stagnant that it acts like amber. Archaeologists theorize that we might eventually find ancient ships with their sails still standing, or books with legible pages sitting on the abyssal plain. The pressure forces water into the pores of the material, supporting it structurally. As long as it remains at that depth, it is immortal. The deep ocean is a suspended animation chamber, holding the potential for the ultimate archaeological discovery, a ship that looks exactly as it did the moment it left the surface, sailing forever in the dark. The conservation of the leather satchels found on the Vasa required a treatment with neatsfoot oil and freeze-drying to restore flexibility to the ancient skin. Inside these satchels, archaeologists found the personal economies of the sailors, coins, spoons, and repair kits. One satchel contained a small lump of beeswax used to wax thread for sewing sails. Another held a lock of hair. These items are the pocket litter of the 17th century. They are not the official cargo. They are the things a man carries because he needs them or loves them. The leather, once stiff and black, becomes supple again after treatment, smelling faintly of the oil and the sea. It is a tangible connection to the hands that packed the bag on the morning the ship sailed, a private archive of a life interrupted. The archaeology of the splash investigates the immediate aftermath of a shipwrecking event, analyzing the debris field to understand the panic and the physics of the sinking. When a ship hits a reef, it often spills its lighter cargo into the surf zone. Ceramics are smashed, and heavy items roll into crevices. By mapping the vector of the spill, archaeologists can determine the speed and angle of the impact. They can see where the passengers stood as they threw their possessions overboard to lighten the ship. A trail of gold coins leading away from the wreck might indicate a person trying to swim to shore with their fortune, only to drop it or drown. The debris field is a map of desperation, a chaotic record of the final struggle against the elements. The sacrificial anode technique used in modern marine engineering has been adapted to protect historic shipwrecks in situ. To stop an iron wreck from corroding further, conservationists can attach large blocks of zinc or aluminum to the hull. Because zinc is more electrically active than iron, the seawater attacks the zinc first. The zinc sacrifices itself, corroding away to protect the iron of the ship. This establishes a cathodic protection system on the seabed. It buys time. Archaeologists can wire a wreck like the USS Arizona with these anodes, slowing down the collapse of the hull by decades. It is a form of life support for a dead ship, using basic chemistry to hold back the inevitable dissolution of the metal. The discovery of the submerged Paleolithic art in the Cosca Cave required divers to navigate a perilous 175-meter-long underwater tunnel in pitch darkness. The tunnel slopes upward, leading to a chamber trapped with air pressure. The air in the cave is toxic, with high levels of carbon dioxide, requiring divers to keep their regulators in. The art on the walls, charcoal drawings of seals and orcs, dates back 27,000 years. The fact that these drawings depict marine animals proves that the people of that time were intimately connected to the sea, even though the coastline was miles away then. The cave is a sanctuary that was sealed by the rising ocean, a time capsule of the human imagination protected by a lethal siphon of water that only the most skilled can traverse. The concept of the underwater cultural heritage extends beyond ships to include the infrastructure of the past: submerged harbors, breakwaters, and fish processing tanks. Along the coast of North Africa, the ruins of Roman garum factories are now half submerged. The large vats used to ferment the fish sauce are cut into the rock. Archaeologists snorkeling over these sites can see the industrial scale of the food production. The rising sea levels have claimed the waterfront real estate of the empire. These sites are not dramatic wrecks, but they are the foundations of the ancient economy, the places where the daily work of feeding the cities took place, now acting as tide pools for crabs and urchins. The identification of ballast stones is often the first clue to a shipwreck site when the wood has rotted away. Ships needed heavy weight in their keels to stay upright. They would pick up stones from the riverbank of their home port. A pile of smooth, rounded river stones sitting on a jagged coral reef is an immediate anomaly. Geologists can analyze these stones to determine their origin. A pile of flint nodules found in the Caribbean points to a ship from England. A pile of granite might point to Brittany. The ballast pile is the footprint of the ship, a geological signature of its home port dumped on a foreign shore, marking the spot where the vessel lost its buoyancy and its life. The excavation of the labelle revealed a specific, tragic artifact, a complete skeleton of a crew member with a cup. He was found in the bow of the ship, curled up on a coil of anchor rope. Next to him was a pewter cup with his name, C. Barange, scratched into the bottom. He likely died of thirst or dehydration while the ship was trapped in the bay, or perhaps he fell asleep and never woke up as the water rose. The preservation was so complete that his brain was still inside his skull, shrunken to the size of a walnut. The cup is a poignant symbol of his final need. Finding a named individual with his personal possession is the ultimate connection, putting a face and a name to the anonymous tragedy of the expedition. The ethical principle of beneficial use in archaeology argues that some wrecks should be left as habitats. A shipwreck is often a haven for marine life, acting as a high-relief reef in a flat ocean. Removing the wreck would destroy this habitat. Archaeologists now work with marine biologists to understand the ecological value of the site. They might document the wreck without moving it, recognizing that the ship now belongs to the ocean as much as to history. The grouper living in the boiler and the sponge growing on the cannon are the new crew. The archaeology becomes a study of the interaction between the artifact and the environment, respecting the ship's new role as a sanctuary for life. The memory of the hand is a concept in archaeology that refers to the tactile connection with the ancient craftsman. When a diver picks up a piece of pottery and feels the ridges left by the potter's fingers on the inside of the jar, or touches a timber and feels the adze marks of the shipwright, They are connecting directly to the physical action of the maker. This sensation is amplified underwater, where the sense of touch is paramount. The water acts as a medium of connection. The artifact has not been touched since it was loaded onto the ship centuries ago. The archaeologist is the first person to hold it since the sailor who lost it. It is a handshake across time, a physical intimacy with the past that is unique to the discipline. And finally, we come to the silence of the ocean floor, the ultimate curator of our history. The seabed is a place of profound stillness, where the noise of the surface world, the wars, the storms, the engines, is filtered out by the depth. In this quiet, cold, and dark museum, the wrecks sleep. They are slowly returning to the elements, their iron turning to rust, their wood turning to silt. But for a moment, they are held in suspension, waiting for the light of a diver's torch to reveal their stories. The ocean remembers everything we have lost to it. It holds our triumphs and our tragedies in its crushing embrace, preserving them in a blue archive that covers 70% of the planet. As we ascend from the deep, leaving the wrecks to their silent vigil, let the pressure lift and the light return. The water turns from black to indigo, to turquoise, and finally, to the sparkling gold of the surface. You have traveled through the liquid history of the world. If you enjoyed this descent into the submerged past, I invite you to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It helps this little submersible of curiosity find its way to other sleepy travelers. But for now, let the current carry you. Let the deep water hold you. You are safe. You are drifting. Good night.